OIR, we have quite a lot of experience with TIA methodologies, and recently we were asked by the Committee of the Regions to conduct a study on rule proofing and integration of rule proofing and TIA methodologies. So just at the beginning, to remind ourselves what we are assessing impacts on. All of that pictures you can see here are rural areas, rural regions, and we have to take account of all of them when we are doing our assessments, not only focusing on some of them. Quick overview about the study goals and the approach. So we have reviewed the experiences with rule proofing in different countries, namely Finland, Australia, Canada, New Zealand, England, and Sweden. And we have reviewed the territorial impact assessment methodologies that are already out there. At here, Quick Check, IATSE, Romulo, Foresight methodologies. We did not have the chance to review all of them, obviously. And we had a look at the interlinkages between TIA and rule proofing. How can TIA contribute to rule proofing? How are the two of them linked? I can quickly skip over that slide because Terry already introduced in the beginning what the link between rule proofing and TIA in the better regulation guidelines actually are. But it's important to keep in mind that we are talking not only about the methodology, but a wider process when talking about rule proofing, about rule thinking and so on. A lot of the recommendations we got out of the study are obviously very similar to what you have been discussing the last time. So rule proofing has been successful when it was required in a formal or explicit manner, when it was applied at the right time in the policy process, when it was targeted. So when there was a decision early on in the process if rule proofing for a specific policy is necessary or not, which was reported to greatly increase the acceptance of the whole approach. And when there was targeted and good support for the authorities responsible for implementing rule proofing in the policy process. Those are all experiences from interviews we got from the mentioned countries. And TIA methodologies in some kind of form are applied in some of them, and they are forming an integral part of the rule proofing process. So at a specific point in time in the policy drafting, to have an assessment based on territorial impact assessment to find out how are rural regions affected. Are they affected differently than others? That can provide valuable input to the overall design of a policy with rural regions in mind. We have assessed the methodologies available, and we saw very crucial elements that are relevant to decide which methodology should be applied and works best. The full length of that guidance is in the report, of course. We have seen that the geographical level where we are assessing makes quite a big difference. So how are rural areas classified? Which stakeholders should be involved in the process, and are they available? And what is the regional resolution I'm working on? So am I working on NUTS 3 level and differentiating rural areas there, or am I working on a much lower territorial level? This obviously links up with things that Patricia already mentioned. The data availability also influences the choice of method. If I'm working on NUTS 3 level and I have data there, it's very different than if I work in a qualitative manner and can work on very small regions. And the timing in the policy process decides quite a lot the methodology, because some of them are able to work with a lot of fuzziness in the policy. Some of them are not and need very concrete information. And based on that, we developed the recommendations for the TIA Quick Check, for Foresight methods, and for EA-TIA, which have been applied on the European level and also on sub-European level with success. Yeah, very concrete recommendations for integrating TIA and rule proofing. So what would be necessary to add or improve for existing TIA methodologies to better contribute to rule proofing? When we differentiate it in three categories, so improvements to the tier quick check, which is available as a web tool at the moment, and doesn't need methodological improvements to contribute, but technical improvements. So, for example, updating databases and shapefiles, increasing the flexibility of the tool to work with lower level assessments, not only NUTS 3 level, as Patricia also mentioned before. Improving the visualization elements. So at the moment, the territorial impact assessment done with that just assesses all European regions at the same time, but there is no possibility to highlight explicitly rural areas in there, which could contribute quite a lot to improve the visibility and of rural areas. And allowing for concrete comparisons. So looking at comparisons between rural areas and other regions across Europe. For qualitative methodologies, they are obviously oftentimes quite flexible for the assessments. However, they oftentimes work with templates, and they are quite good to structure the process, to structure the assessment process. But they are not directly linked to rural areas. They might not highlight them. They might not include them there. Therefore, those rural impacts might be forgotten or overlooked in the overall assessment. And for checklist approaches, which are applied in a lot of countries, the most important aspect was to provide clear guidance and work with past examples. We've seen from a lot of interviews that there were checklists, there was guidance, but people still were, how can that be done in practice? I don't know what to do here. So working with past examples for such flexible methodologies was quite important. And finally, we were called to include that in the report, be bold. Don't try to have a quick checklist and do that at the end of the policy process, but be very bold and include that early on, try to influence the policy. Yeah, so for the integration, we have made some recommendations both for the EU level and for the national and regional level. For the EU level, we already have some interesting tools out there for territorial impact assessment, which could quite easily integrate with overall rule proofing approaches. So at the moment, there is a suggestion to do a necessity check at the beginning or at an early stage of policy drafting to identify the territorial angle of impacts, to combine all the sectoral effects and have a look at the territorial perspective here. And this could very easily include rural areas as well, because obviously they are parts of the territories. They might just need to be highlighted in this necessity check to improve it here. And a second aspect that is already going on to some extent is to include territorial impact assessment and rule proofing in the inter-service consultations. So at an early process, having kind of custodians in those processes, safeguarding that rule effects are discussed in the inter-service consultation that are addressed, also with providing concrete methodological guidance or suggestions at least for assessing them. And this could quite easily combine territorial impact assessments and rule proofing in the overall policy process, with one contributing to the other, independent of the actual methodology applied, of course. And for the local, regional, and national level, we saw that there is quite a lot of skepticism towards complicated and fixed methodologies that are suggested. However, there's also the need for clear guidance, for methodological guidance on how to do that. That was the most posed question. We don't know how to do it. We would like to do it maybe, but we don't know how to. And therefore, one of the main success factors we saw from countries which reported good experiences with integrating territorial assessments and rule proofing was that having kind of a center of expertise, someone you can turn to, quick and easy access to information about how to do something, because the desk officer, the policy people doing creating it in the ministries might not have the knowledge. However, if you have methodological guidance, if you have people you can call up quick and easy, then you can then that greatly improves their or increases their willingness to consider rural impacts as well, even if it's not mandatory. Obviously, having mandatory elements in the overall process was also reported as a success factor, because total voluntary voluntary implementation might not be realistic. And finally, also something you identified in the last meeting was networking efforts. This is a lot based on experience sharing, experience with methods, experience with processes from other regions, from other countries, are very valuable to countries and regions looking to implement impact assessments, territorial impact assessments, and to rule-proof their policies. Yeah, thanks a lot. Quite a quick overview. The whole study will be published soon. It is already at the Committee of the Regions, and according to our information, in the coming weeks, it will be published and available to read up on the guidance and the information we found in there.